We rise in hope, in prayer. We find ourselves here. We are right here. We are Unitarian Universalists, and we have a lived theology that tells us we are one and we are loved. Our Unitarian heritage gives us the gift of a belief in the oneness of humanity, that we are all connected. And as long as one of us is not free, then none of us is free. From our Universalist heritage, we receive the gift of abundant love. We are all deserving of love, and we are all held in a divine love. We are one and we are loved. Part of the religious teaching I received growing up was that Jesus of Nazareth was a teacher and a prophet, and that he was a reformer and a bit of a rabble rouser, which was very appealing to me. He spoke truth to power, and he preached that God was in all of us, and that we are all God's children, even or especially those who society looks down upon. Although we did not read the Bible in my home as a child, I heard some stories from friends or just, around in the popular culture. And I felt like I understood this Jesus fellow. He seemed like the kind of person that my family would hang out with. It didn't hurt that the pictures of Jesus I saw as a child depicted him as a blue-eyed white man with long hair and this long beard. And this is, in fact, what almost all of the grown men I knew looked like. It was the 70s after all, and my hippie family and their friends were definitely into the natural look. And the men all had long hair and beards, and indeed, they were mostly white. I especially enjoyed the stories about Jesus as he traveled the countryside, speaking and teaching, and crowds would gather round to hear him speak. Can't you just envision him standing on this hill, people spread out all around, listening to his wise words? Often one or more of those gathered would pose questions to him. On one occasion, an expert in the law stood up to test Jesus. "Teacher," he asked, "what must I do to inherit eternal life?" And seeing this man was an expert in the law, Jesus replied in the form of a question. "What is written in the law?" he asked. "How do you read it?" The man, well-versed in the laws and quick on his feet, answered, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your strength, and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself." "You have answered correctly," Jesus replied. "Do this, and you will inherit eternal life." Turns out, this man of the law had some follow-up questions. He said, "But isn't everyone around me my neighbor? Like, who exactly does this neighbor category include? Do I really have to love everyone as I love myself?" Well, instead of directly answering the man, Jesus told him a story. He said, "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho and was attacked by robbers who stripped him, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. Now, by chance, a priest happened to be going down that same road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. So too, a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side of the road. Then along comes a Samaritan. When the Samaritan saw the injured man, he was moved with pity. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, having poured oil and wine on them. Then he put him on his own animal, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day, he took out 2 denarii, gave them to the innkeeper, and said, "Take care of him. When I come back, I will repay you whatever more you spend." After telling the parable, Jesus turns back to the man and asks, "Which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of the robbers?" The man answered, "The one who showed him mercy." Jesus said to him, "Go and do likewise." This parable Jesus told seems simple on the surface. If you see someone who needs help, help them. Love your neighbor as yourself. We are one. What happens to one of us happens to all of us. So, but what if we complicate this story a little bit? For instance, the law-learned man who challenged Jesus with his question. This is a character I think we can all recognize, yes? He is the one who puts you to the test. He questions and then he keeps questioning. Maybe he even secretly hopes Jesus will fail to answer him satisfactorily, thereby boosting his own ego. This is not a humble man. This man of the law who tested Jesus. I'm guessing many of us have 1 or 2, or maybe 5 or 6 of these characters in our lives. I find myself more and more appreciating this challenging one in my life. As annoying as they may be at times, they keep us on our toes. And even though their intentions may not be noble, and perhaps are sometimes even intended to be destructive, their challenges and criticisms can actually serve to hold us accountable to our principles if we see them in this way. Lately, I've been asking myself, who are these voices in my life? Because I want to be intentional about how I engage them. And so I ask you, who are those challenging characters in your life? Would it work for you to flip your inner script and think of them as catalysts or sparks for accountability? I've taken to a new practice when I receive a criticism or a challenge. I start by saying, "Thank you." So back to this story that Jesus told. Both a priest and a Levite passed the man who had been robbed and beaten and left in a ditch. So one way we may see this is as Jesus is telling the people that being a religious leader doesn't mean one necessarily does the right thing all the time. We Unitarian Universalists have a long history of questioning authority. We don't tend to put our religious leaders way up high on a pedestal because we understand they are humans like the rest of us, flawed ones who do make mistakes sometimes. We see in them people like us who are living spiritual lives. And this makes that kind of life accessible for all of us. I am an intern minister, which means I am kind of like some people say like a baby minister or something, but I've been thinking about it and I think I'm actually like a teenager in my ministerial development. I've worked with teenagers for a long time. And what I mean by this is that I am learning by doing. No matter how many times I've heard the warnings not to do this or that, sometimes I still fall into the trap anyway. And I learn through my experience of making a mistake. It's a funny feeling to be not at the usual age when people think that you're still in learning mode, but yet I am. And I feel the ways in which continually learning and growing is actually keeping me feeling young. It is also a gift this congregation has given to me and my fellow colleague intern ministers, Anthony and Carrie, a gift for which I am so grateful. I love learning from you all. I love getting to know you. There's going to be even more of that all next year when we are together in person as much as possible. And I love learning from Reverend Peggy and Reverend Chris. They show us how to be grounded in a spiritual life while still doing the necessary and important work of creating a more just world here and now. We not only look to our religious leaders for guidance, we hope they will challenge us to live our lives authentically and with integrity. Certainly, this was the role Jesus undertook. He comforted the afflicted and afflicted the comfortable. He challenged and inspired the people to question and resist the tendency to treat as other those who are different from one's own ethnic or religious group or social class. This is one of the clear messages in the story that often gets lost in our understanding of it today. In Jesus's time, the Jewish community despised the Samaritans. And the Samaritans were not especially friendly towards the Jews either. So here is this Jewish man, robbed, beaten, lying naked in a ditch on the side of the road, a road that is known to be an especially dangerous road. It is a steep and curving road with many places for robbers to lay in wait, ready to ambush travelers on their way from Jerusalem to Jericho. The man is passed by two fellow Jews who go so far as to cross to the other side of the road to avoid even being near him. There are different interpretations and excuses made for why the priest and the Levite, both religious leaders in their community, didn't help the beaten man. So this naked man in the ditch appeared to be dead. These religious men were on their way to the temple and would become unclean if they touched a dead body. Some interpretations, based on the direction they were headed in the story, say they were actually on their way away from the temple and had already performed their rites. Regardless of those details, they did not even stop to check whether or not the man was alive, much less did they make a move to assist him. Jesus is clear on this point. They were wrong. But a Samaritan, one who is hated by the Jews, one who is looked down upon and thought of as less than, this Samaritan is the one who stops and helps. He gently cares for the man. He takes some of his own oil and wine and uses it to clean the man's wounds. He lifts the man and puts him on his donkey and carries him to the nearest inn, rents a room, cares for the man overnight, and before he leaves the next day, he pays the innkeeper so the man can stay there until he recovers. He goes so far as to tell the innkeeper that he will pay more money on his way back from Jericho if it ends up costing more for the man to stay and eat and drink and rest until he is well enough to leave on his own. This is way above and beyond, one might say. And even more importantly, for the point Jesus is making, this behavior was least expected from a member of one despised group to a member of the very group of people who despises him. Jesus is teaching that love for our fellow humans should supersede one's anger, prejudice, and fear and hatred of the other. So I ask, who is your neighbor? I'm asking not only who is the afflicted that needs to be comforted today, but from whom would you least expect to receive loving kindness and care? Who would you least expect to reach out and help you? We are in the midst of deep social, political, and cultural division in our country and in our world. There is so much othering happening around and within us that sometimes we don't even realize that when we're talking about a group of people as a monolith, these so-and-sos, we deny the humanity and the agency of the individuals within that group. We know this, but do we know this? This is especially true when it comes to groups that are geographically located. Like, for instance, I lived in the South for years, and that's where I learned community organizing skills and where I learned nonviolent civil disobedience. Would you expect radical grassroots organizers to be Southerners? Well, if you live in the South, and you probably do know that, right? But if you don't, you may not realize that. So let's never forget that it was Black-led grassroots organizations working for years on the ground in Georgia that won the elections of the first Jewish and the first Black senators from that state just this past year. So when we think of and speak of the South, or those like whomever or whatever, fill in the blank group, let's complicate it a little bit. Let's not deny the humanity and agency of all the people living there. Many times people don't make a choice to be where they are, or they make a choice to be there so that they can try to make a change. The only way we can break down these walls, I think, is to be in relationship and to get to know people. This is one of the goals that the Bridge to Jordan program I'm leading and begins next Sunday after service with the first learning seminar. We will engage with our own stories and those of one another as we learn about the people of Jordan and ultimately get to know some of them in hopes of creating an international and interfaith partnership. By learning their struggles and triumphs and sharing our struggles and triumphs with them, we may build a bridge of understanding between Jordanian Muslims, Christians, and atheists, and American Unitarian Universalists. This is just one example, one way of building relationships. I like this use of an image of a bridge because a bridge is open on both sides. And people can go across, back and forth. They can meet in the middle. They can meet over here. They can meet over here. There's so much possibility. The Samaritan of Jesus's parable embodies the behavior that comes naturally when we really and truly understand that we are one, that we are all connected, and as long as one of us suffers, we all suffer. Let us strive to build bridges of understanding through taking the time to build relationships, knowing that it is only through building the beloved community that we will not only survive, but we will thrive. May it be so.